In every field of the world, there is no shortage of experts in those fields, and the underground world is no exception. This is the story of an eccentric man from the underworld. At the beginning of the film, we see two individuals seemingly running away from someone. One of them barely sticks his head out before immediately taking a bullet, while the other manages to call the elevator and escape just in time. He only catches a glimpse of the pursuer before the elevator doors close. This fleeing man knows that the one chasing him is the infamous assassin, Fable. At this moment, Fable has climbed down from the outside of the building, while the man being pursued realizes that he never should have gotten involved in human trafficking. Now, his boss has been assassinated right in front of his subordinates. The others have quickly been eliminated, and he himself is being hunted by death itself. When he reaches the first floor, Fable is already there waiting for him and shoots him in the neck. He desperately orders his comrades to take down Fable, but the assassin effortlessly dodges and shoots one of them. However, Fable drops his gun, so he swiftly switches to using a knife, eliminating the second target before using the corpse as a shield to block bullets from another enemy who just stepped out of the elevator. He then quickly guns him down as well. Fable muses that the name Fable was something people like them had given him, but in reality, he is simply a professional assassin. Fable then leaves and meets up with his female partner. He asks her to turn on the TV so he can watch a program featuring a comedian he idolizes. His partner is surprised that he can still laugh after taking down nearly 10 people. Later, they head to a riverside to dispose of some parts of the gun and then return to their hideout to meet their boss. Fable is a bit disappointed that he has to eat fish again today. We learn that Fable has been working as an assassin for 6 years, but the job no longer brings in as much money as it used to. The boss asks Fable if he remembers how many people he has killed over the past 6 years. The reason they have survived until now is that all their assassination targets have been well-known and influential figures. The boss has kept count and confirms that Fable has killed a total of 71 people, with this year being his busiest. Therefore, he wants Fable to lay low for a year before resurfacing. He hands over the money Fable has earned and instructs him and his partner to live a fake life for the time being. The boss has already arranged the necessary documents for both of them and has connections with a Yakuza organization in Osaka that will assist them in their new lives. When Fable questions why they must move far away, the boss explains that adapting to different environments is essential to becoming a true professional. He also warns them that if they kill anyone during this period, he will deal with them personally. Both of them comply and then head to Fable's place to pack. His partner notices that he has very few belongings, to which he responds that he moves around frequently, so he doesn't carry much. She then hands him his new identification papers. His new name will be Akira, while she will be Yoko. On paper, they will be siblings. Akira then retrieves his guns from around the house, storing them in different locations: bullets in water bottles, barrels in spray cans, and one particular gun he hides in a radio since it's his favorite. He only takes the gun body with him while leaving the barrel in the microwave for the boss to collect later. Once they finish packing, they set off. Yoko asks why Akira became an assassin, but he seems slightly annoyed by how she calls him Big Brother. She argues that since they are about to live as siblings, they should start getting used to it. Regarding Yoko, she lost her parents in a fire at the age of 10 and was taken in by their boss. A year ago, she was assigned as Akira's driver and partner. Akira refuses to talk about his past, and Yoko doesn't press further. They later stop at a gas station to buy supplies. Akira notices two men who seem to be stealing a car, so he stays behind to keep an eye on them while asking Yoko to go buy their stuff. He observes that the two are amateurs, unable to even pick a valuable car to steal. The thieves notice Akira watching them and approach him aggressively. He wants to avoid violence, but when they attempt to rob him, he has no choice but to teach them a lesson. Yoko rushes out and reminds him of the boss's warning, but Akira argues that they were the ones who started it, so he only reacted in self-defense. Yoko had to take Akira away before anyone could see them. She wanted him to learn to hold back in the future, or at least avoid getting into conflicts with others to prevent accidentally killing someone. Akira now realized that living a normal life was harder than he had thought. Yoko also suggested that he should learn the local accent, but Akira claimed that he was already fluent in 5 different regional dialects and could switch between them at will. He then asked about the company that had worked with him 3 years ago and how it was doing now. Yoko explained that this company was the one helping them establish their fake identities. There were two people Akira needed to pay attention to: the boss, Hiroshi, and the squad leader, Takeshi. Akira then switched his tone of speech and went shopping for clothes with Yoko. Meanwhile, the two men Yoko mentioned were quite concerned about sheltering an independent assassin, but Hiroshi believed they had no choice. The previous boss had business ties with Fable's organization, so they had to accept it. Besides, they were only providing temporary housing, not fully harboring Fable, so there was no need to worry too much. Hiroshi didn't know what Fable was really like, but according to the previous boss, Fable had single-handedly wiped out all the enemies of a rival company swiftly and efficiently, with each target receiving a single shot to the head or heart. Hiroshi acknowledged that Fable was a killing genius, someone who felt no remorse after sending his targets to the afterlife. Later, they received word that Akira and his sister had arrived, so they went to meet them, instructing their subordinates not to interfere during the process. When they finally saw him, Takeshi thought Fable looked more like a coward. To confirm, he asked Akira how he would handle a situation where he had to kill both of them. Akira calmly stated that he would crush Takeshi's throat, then grabbed the gun from his coat pocket to take out Hiroshi. He even knew exactly what kind of gun was in Takeshi's pocket and how many bullets it contained. Hiroshi was surprised to learn Takeshi had brought a gun into the meeting, but Takeshi argued that he couldn't afford to be careless when meeting a legendary assassin. They then asked how Akira planned to escape when there were many subordinates outside. Akira immediately pointed out that Hiroshi also had a gun in his pocket. Both men now fully accepted that Akira was indeed the real Fable and laid out some rules for them while they lived there. They would provide accommodation but expected the two not to cause trouble for a full year. If anything happened, they would not assist in covering it up, and if the two caused damage to the company, they would be kicked out. Akira and Yoko then arrived at their new residence, where Takeshi warned them not to touch the car in his garage. He also wanted to test Akira's shooting skills by naming a target that Akira had to shoot within 2 seconds. Akira admitted that revolvers weren't his specialty, but he was willing to try. Takeshi then mentioned a security camera, and Akira fired at a spot on the ceiling. However, Yoko pointed out that the actual camera was in a different location, and Takeshi's car ended up getting hit by falling debris. Yoko promised to clean up the mess for him, and he left. Before leaving, Takeshi instructed his men to keep an eye on the two newcomers and ordered them to check the camera footage. To his surprise, Akira had shot down a hidden camera rather than the obvious one. Later, Akira returned to his room, removed all the hidden cameras, and climbed onto the roof to observe the surroundings. That night, Takeshi checked in with his subordinates to ask about the surveillance. His men reported that all the cameras in Akira's room had been removed, but the ones in Yoko's room were still functioning. When asked why he was monitoring them, Takeshi admitted that he didn't like the pair and wanted to find a way to get rid of them before they caused trouble for the company. He then instructed his men to come up with a plan to drive them away. That night, Yoko unexpectedly invited Akira to go drinking to celebrate their new home, while one of Takeshi's men followed them and called for backup to stir up trouble. Yoko suggested that Akira should find a hobby to make life more interesting since she planned to find a boyfriend within the next year. She also asked him not to pick fights with whoever she decided to bring home. As they left the bar, two thugs summoned by Takeshi's subordinate appeared, ready to start a fight. Yoko was already drunk, so Akira wanted her to leave, fearing that if she got hurt, he would lose control and end up killing the two men. Yoko had no choice but to leave first, while Akira tried to act his way out of trouble. He dodged the first man's attack and realized that his opponent had no martial arts skills, so he let himself take a few hits while subtly causing the guy's hand to get injured, forcing the second man to step in. Akira quickly identified him as a trained fighter and deliberately let himself get knocked back by a kick, pretending to be weak. He then took a punch to the face, allowing some blood to trickle from his nose, and even pretended to cry, making them lose interest and leave. Soon after, a woman Akira had seen earlier that day approached and helped him up, but he simply thanked her before she left. The two men who had started the fight later received payment from Takeshi's subordinate, but found it strange Akira's reactions seemed exaggerated compared to the force they had used. The subordinate reported this to Takeshi, who concluded that Akira still knew how to act. At that moment, Takeshi was visiting a friend to buy some bullets. Later, he and another subordinate went for a walk, casually shooting to relieve stress. Meanwhile, Akira suddenly received a message from his boss, suggesting that he should get a pet for entertainment. The boss even used a sticker of Akira's favorite idol to persuade him. Yoko received the same message, so the next day, the two of them went to the shopping center to look for a pet. Once they arrived, Yoko had no idea what to choose, while Akira took an interest in a parrot. He then noticed that the man from the previous night, the one who had started the fight, had shown up again. Telling Yoko to stay and keep browsing, Akira excused himself to the restroom. Sure enough, the man was tailing him again. Akira intentionally ran, causing the man to alert his allies outside to cut him off. However, Akira led them into a situation where they ended up bumping into each other, losing track of where he had gone. Still, he was eventually spotted again, so he let out a loud scream and ran off, baiting them into chasing him. Only the fighter managed to keep up. After a while, the man started getting tired, so Akira also pretended to be exhausted and stopped. The moment the man ran toward him, Akira took off again. Their chase led them to a bridge, where Akira suddenly climbed onto the railing and jumped off, landing safely, leaving the man stunned at how he had done it. Akira then returned to Yoko, who was still undecided about which pet to buy. The parrot Akira liked turned out to be quite expensive because it was a rare breed. According to Yoko's research, these parrots had long lifespans, so she suggested that Akira name it. That night, Akira tried giving the parrot different names, but it only responded to Captain. Meanwhile, the two men who had chased Akira recounted their experience to Takeshi's subordinate, who was revealed to be named Hashi. Takeshi, upon hearing the story, realized that Hashi seemed to have a liking for Yoko. Seeing this as an opportunity, he gave Hashi some money and instructed him to take Yoko out for a meal to gather information about Akira. Hashi was a bit self-conscious, but Takeshi told him to stop acting weak. Akira, meanwhile, was still trying to bond with his parrot, but it remained stubborn and even bit him. Yoko had chosen a hamster and Hashi planned to use this as a conversation topic, though he knew that if he drank even a single beer, he would forget everything he had memorized. The next morning, Takeshi unexpectedly showed up at the garage to get his car and saw Akira training there. He then invited Akira to have dinner that night to talk. Around the same time, Hashi went to ask Yoko out for a tour of the city. Yoko thought about inviting Akira, but upon learning that he had already been invited by Takeshi, she decided against it. She then warned Akira to make sure not to lose his temper and kill anyone. That evening, Akira met with Takeshi, who shared that the car in his garage was his most treasured possession, having been with him since before he joined the organization. In response, Akira spoke about his prized handgun, which had saved his life twice. He stated that if he ever died, he would take it with him. Meanwhile, Yoko was quite disappointed when Hashi picked her up in an old van that had a bit of a smell. He then drove her to a restaurant she had already guessed he would choose. Takeshi took Akira to a warehouse, explaining that he had only heard rumors about Fable and wanted to verify if Akira was the real deal. Inside the warehouse, there was a wrestler who owed Takeshi money. Despite multiple collection attempts, the man refused to pay, and they were unable to defeat him in a fight. Takeshi wanted Akira to take care of him since it was his personal request. Their boss Hiroshi wouldn't know about it. Meanwhile, Yoko was having barbecue with Hashi, contemplating eating more but also worrying whether Hashi could afford it. Back at the warehouse, Akira switched into combat mode. Takeshi assured him that he would handle the cleanup, so Akira was free to take down the wrestler however he saw fit. Akira wasted no time, charging in while the wrestler remained cocky. Akira swiftly grabbed his head, yanked him backward, and delivered a precise strike to his neck, leaving him immobilized. However, at that moment, Takeshi stepped forward with a gun and ordered Akira to finish the job. Akira refused, stating that he had only agreed to subdue the man whether he lived or died was Takeshi's decision. Takeshi, however, still regarded Akira as a serial killer, which slightly offended him, as he considered himself a professional assassin, not some lunatic who killed for fun. Takeshi's men, watching from behind, urged Akira not to do anything reckless. But Akira had already noticed that the gun wasn't loaded, so he quickly seized it and aimed it at Takeshi. He knew that Takeshi wouldn't be able to hit him from that range. However, Takeshi calmly stepped forward, challenging Akira to shoot. If he did, it would confirm that he was a true killer. The two faced off, and Akira pointed out that if he were truly a murderer, Takeshi would already be dead and he would be home by now. but he had vowed to live for the next year without killing anyone, so he set the gun and his mask aside. Takeshi then asked what life meant to him. Akira admitted that he hadn't found any meaning yet, if anything. Perhaps it was the parrot he had just bought. Takeshi wasn't satisfied with that answer, saying that, to him, life was the most meaningful thing. He wouldn't let just anyone take it away from him. Takeshi then shot the wrestler dead, revealing that while the man hadn't killed anyone, he had ruined the lives of many. Takeshi had warned him when he first borrowed money, but he didn't listen. This was the consequence. Takeshi then called in his men, introducing one of them as Kuro. He instructed Kuro to keep everything that happened a secret. He then took Akira out for dinner, leaving Kuro to clean up the body. Meanwhile, Hashi had taken Yoko to a bar for another round of drinking. He was convinced that he had won her over, but despite drinking heavily, Yoko remained far more sober than Hashi. However, she found him somewhat cute when he was drunk. At dinner, Takeshi asked Akira if he had been the one to tamper with the surveillance cameras in the room. Akira clarified that he hadn't destroyed them, he had only relocated them, and he could return them if needed. But what really interested Takeshi was why Akira hadn't touched the ones in Yoko's room. Akira explained that, due to the nature of his work, he might face certain situations in the future, so if they kept an eye on Yoko, it gave him some peace of mind. Akira then asked why Takeshi had risked putting himself in danger to test him so soon. Takeshi revealed that his older brother would be getting out of prison soon, and he would be busy helping him reintegrate into society. Meanwhile, Yoko was tending to Hashi, who was throwing up in the restroom. When she returned to the bar, she realized that, somehow, she had started to develop feelings for Hashi. Maybe working with someone as rigid as Akira for too long had lowered her standards. She then waited to see what state Hashi would be in when he came out. He was so drunk that he could barely stand and ended up collapsing on the floor. Yoko wanted to call a taxi, but the bar owner suggested calling an ambulance instead, suspecting that Hashi had alcohol poisoning. Elsewhere, Takeshi warned Akira not to cause any trouble, but Akira reassured him that he intended to live a quiet, peaceful life. He also thought about how young people these days were into gaming, so he decided he would give it a try. Takeshi wanted Akira to find a part-time job, but Akira wasn't too interested, reasoning that the country provided unemployment benefits anyway. However, Takeshi remarked that if his own son turned out to be a useless bum, he'd beat him up and kick him out of the house. As they parted ways, Akira reconsidered and thought maybe he really should find a job. Meanwhile, Yoko had taken Hashi home and was messing around with him. She placed a chair on top of him and tried to tempt him into coming closer, even showing off her lingerie to motivate him. At the same time, Akira spotted the girl who had helped him before. Takeshi identified her as Misaki, who was juggling 5 different jobs to pay off her family's debts while saving up to open her own store. He advised Akira to steer clear of her. He also reiterated that Akira should get a job instead of just hiding away. Hashi had fallen asleep in the kitchen. Yoko returned to her room, and Akira spent the night near his parrot, contemplating what kind of work he should do. The next day, Takeshi received an unexpected call from Kuro, informing him that boss Hiroshi wanted to see him. Hashi was still missing in action. Hiroshi had learned about Takeshi's stunt of testing Akira, and even pulling a gun on him. He called it a foolish move since they had been instructed to treat Akira as a guest. Hiroshi also suspected that Akira might not be the only fable that their business partners had. Regardless, he let the matter slide and told Takeshi to focus on the upcoming mission. By then, Hashi had sobered up and gone home, though he had no memory of why his face was bruised. When he reported back to Takeshi, he was reassigned. He was no longer required to monitor Akira and his sister, and instead, he was to assist Kuro with other tasks. Takeshi didn't blame Kuro for leaking information to Hiroshi, as it would have been impossible to hide anyway. Elsewhere, Akira watched a movie featuring his favorite actor, while Hashi told Kuro about Akira's ability to jump from great heights unscathed. Kuro was in awe, thinking Akira was a true assassin, whereas Hashi figured he might just be some kind of extreme athlete. Inspired, Kuro attempted to imitate Akira's feat, but it didn't end well. Takeshi was cooking when he received the report about Kuro's injury and went to the hospital to pick him up. On the way home, Takeshi realized Kuro was trying to become an assassin. He told him that this profession was for crazy people. It was better to hire assassins than to become one. Meanwhile, Yoko had gathered several job application forms for Akira to fill out. He started his job hunt at a clothing store. The owner appreciated his honesty, but found it amusing that Akira was born on April Fool's Day. Next, he tried applying at a delivery company, but they also laughed at his birth date and ultimately rejected him as they already had enough workers. Unexpectedly, he ran into Misaki again. She recognized him and, seeing that he was job hunting, offered to help. She took him to her workplace and presented his resume to her company's president. Not only did they chuckle at his birth date, but they also found it amusing that he listed his favorite actor as a hobby. Despite that, they called Akira in and explained the job. The company specialized in designing business cards and flyers, and they needed someone to handle deliveries. Akira could take on the job, and if additional tasks arose that he could manage, they'd consider giving him a raise. Since deliveries were infrequent due to the rise of digital alternatives, the pay wasn't high, but Akira accepted the job anyway, much to the president's delight. Meanwhile, Kuro and Hashi were preparing a shipment of drugs disguised as adult film distribution. Kuro still wanted to become an assassin and asked Hashi what he thought about the profession. Hashi didn't take it too seriously, but Kuro was determined to leave his mark on the world. That night, Akira informed Takeshi that he had found a job, and it was with Misaki. Takeshi believed that Akira was causing trouble for Misaki and offered to help him find a job instead. He asked what Akira thought about working on a fishing boat for a year, but Akira immediately refused. Later, Akira told Yoko about the conversation, and she asked what Misaki was like and whether she was cute, suspecting that Akira might fall for her. However, Akira had no understanding of romantic feelings. He also asked if Yoko had named the pet mouse yet, but she still hadn't decided on a name. Akira then thought about learning what workplace romance was like, seemingly by watching a romance film featuring his favorite actor. The next morning, Akira arrived at work early. Meanwhile, Takeshi went to pick up his recently released comrade from prison. Akira was shown the vehicle he would be using for deliveries. His boss jokingly called it a Porsche, but when Akira saw it, it was actually just a bicycle. According to the company president, a bicycle was convenient since it didn't require fuel or parking fees. At the same time, Takeshi treated his comrade to a meal and explained the current changes in the gang. The organization had transformed into a company in name, requiring them to pay salaries to keep members working seriously. Gangs were no longer as large as before, typically consisting of only 20 to 30 people. On their way back, Takeshi and his comrade saw Akira making a delivery. The newly released man, Kojima, seemed to take an interest in Akira. Akira returned to the office, and everyone was impressed by how quickly he completed his delivery. A normal person would need 40 minutes for a round trip, but Akira finished in just 20 minutes and even had time to stop for coffee. They acknowledged that he was a true professional. Misaki suggested throwing a welcome party for Akira. Meanwhile, Hiroshi gave Kojima some money to help him get by for the time being. When asked about his future plans, Kojima was uncertain. For now, he would stay at Takeshi's place until he found a new home, since their spare property had been rented out for a year. Takeshi planned to help Kojima find a vehicle, but as for guns, carrying them around was no longer an option. The violent gangs of the past had either been eradicated or forced to change their methods to avoid police intervention. Takeshi noted that Kojima would need time to adjust to society again. Elsewhere, Akira went out to eat with his co-workers. They were surprised that he ate beans without peeling them, but he found it normal. When he dropped a bean and bent down to pick it up, he noticed a camera-like device under the table, right across from the director who was seated opposite Misaki, who was wearing a skirt. Realizing what was happening, Akira casually ate the bean as if nothing was wrong. This made Misaki think he must have lived a harsh life. He then recounted how he had been abandoned in the mountains with just a knife and had to survive on his own. His co-workers, however, found it ironic that someone so resilient had been beaten up by delinquents to the point of crying. They concluded that determination and courage were not the same thing. Misaki felt sorry for Akira, assuming he had been abandoned as a child, and even teared up when she saw him eating chicken bones. She told him he didn't need to eat the bones, but he reasoned that they provided calcium. He then flicked a piece of bone to misalign the hidden camera. When they left, the director, who lived in the same direction as Misaki, offered to walk with her. Meanwhile, Akira was invited out for drinks by the company president. On their way, the director noticed Misaki's house keys inside her backpack and took it from her under the pretense of carrying it for her to conserve her energy. Misaki remained unaware that her keys had been stolen. Akira and the company president then went to another bar for drinks. There, they encountered someone who had brought Kiro along. Both of them were regulars at the establishment, and the owner only asked them to keep quiet. The moment Kiro sat down and took out a cigarette, he noticed Akira was there, so he immediately abandoned the idea of smoking. Kiro wanted to be Akira's disciple but didn't dare to approach him directly, so he resorted to boasting about his talents to his underlings, though they didn't understand a word of it, nor did Akira and the company president, who were seated nearby. The president suggested that Akira learn some martial arts for self-defense, but Akira stated that he wasn't fond of violence. Meanwhile, the president found the two gangsters behind them annoying, prompting one of Kiro's underlings to start trouble. However, Kiro ordered them to stay put and not cause a scene. At the same time, the director snuck into Misaki's apartment and began rummaging through her belongings. He went through her underwear drawer and engaged in perverse acts with her clothes before inspecting her personal items. He then discovered that she had once worked as a bikini model and proceeded to take numerous photos for himself. Meanwhile, Akira and the president were about to leave, and Kiro offered to cover their bill as an apology for the earlier commotion. When Akira got home, he reflected on whether eating bean shells was actually normal. He realized that his unusual habits stemmed from the fact that he had once truly struggled to survive in the wilderness with nothing but a knife. Later, Misaki called Akira for help, having lost her keys. Akira assessed the situation and saw that he could easily pick the lock, but decided to feign ignorance and decline. He asked if she had anywhere else to stay, but since it was late, her friends were likely asleep. Akira then invited her to stay at his place for the night. Remembering that Akira had a younger sister, Misaki agreed. Meanwhile, the director was shocked to discover that the company that had photographed Misaki's modeling work was actually an adult film studio. At Akira's home, he let Misaki stay in Yoko's room. Unfortunately for Misaki, Yoko was drunk and prone to acting oddly. Once Yoko fell asleep, Akira silently expressed his appreciation for how she had tolerated Yoko up until now. Elsewhere, Hashi visited Takeshi's house and encountered Kajima. Kajima immediately displayed his tough guy persona, but quickly apologized when he realized Hashi was also a company underling, allowing him inside. Hashi had come only to return Takeshi's keys, but Kajima invited him for a drink. Thinking tea was too soft, Hashi chose beer instead. Kajima instructed Hashi to show proper respect to his superiors and to inform the other underlings to do the same whenever they met him. The two then wondered why Takeshi was taking so long in the bath. Upon checking, they found him unconscious. They rushed him to the hospital, where Kajima revealed that Takeshi had suffered a heart attack. He asked Hashi if Takeshi had been under any particular stress lately. Hashi mentioned that ever since Akira and his sister moved in, Takeshi had seemed troubled. Kajima then reported Takeshi's condition to Hiroshi and also requested to borrow Hashi for a while. Hiroshi agreed, as long as Kajima didn't bully him too much. Hashi then led Kajima to Akira's home. Upon arrival, Kajima told Hashi to wait outside and went inside to take a look around. He blamed Akira for Takeshi's recent exhaustion, noting that Takeshi didn't even like Akira or his sister. Yet, the two siblings had been living comfortably under Hiroshi's protection without paying rent, which Kajima found unacceptable. He pulled out a knife and demanded that Akira pay 100,000 yen per month to continue staying there. Akira agreed without resistance, and Kojima left. Meanwhile, Misaki finally found her keys under her desk. Akira later advised her to change her locks if she felt uneasy. The next day, the company president asked Akira if he had gotten into trouble with the gangsters from the previous night. He admitted that he had confronted them directly and, realizing that he might have caused issues while drunk, apologized to Akira if he had dragged him into anything. Meanwhile, Kajima met with an old business associate to buy a gun. Takeshi had previously come here to purchase ammunition. However, the seller claimed they only sold pets now. Kajima, unconvinced, caught the scent of gunpowder on him and offered to pay above market price, successfully acquiring a revolver. Yoko woke up and found the note Misaki had left behind. She went to get a drink and planned to invite Hashi out for the evening, but he was busy and had to decline. Just then, Hashi witnessed a man falling from a great height, and Kajima ordered him to put the man in the car. Kojima took him back to his place and told Hashi that this man had once invited him to engage in human trafficking. The man had borrowed 3 million yen from Kojima, but after Kojima was arrested, he ran off without repaying the debt. Now, Kojima had come to collect. He wanted the full 3 million back and pulled out his gun, asking how much the man could pay upfront since the interest over 15 years had doubled the amount to 6 million. Seeing that the man wanted to speak, Kojima removed the gag but warned that if he screamed, a bullet would go straight into his face. Meanwhile, Akira was surprised to see Kuro at his house. Kuro then formally asked Akira to take him as a disciple. Back at Kojima's place, the captured man promised to repay the debt within a month. However, Kojima ordered Hashi to go to the man's house and confiscate all his assets and documents. Immediately after, Kojima shot him dead upon realizing that he had enough money at home to repay the debt. Meanwhile, Kuro explained his reasons for wanting to learn from Akira, but Akira stated that in the underworld, one must never leave behind traces or a name that was the mark of a true professional. Hashi was utterly shaken by witnessing a murder, but Kojima told him to stay calm. Kojima then explained that killing people gave him the same satisfaction as sex. He ordered Hashi to dispose of the body and to keep the man's hand intact to unlock his safe. Meanwhile, the director had thoroughly dug into Misaki's past and planned to use this information to blackmail her, just like in certain adult films. As Akira was grilling fish at home, Yoko invited him out, but he just wanted to stay in and watch movies starring his favorite actress like a normal person. Meanwhile, Hashi and Kojima dumped the corpse into the river, carefully ensuring that it wouldn't float back up. While Akira was watching movies at home, Yoko went to a bar and met a young man who was immediately drawn to her. The man quickly went to freshen up before returning to offer Yoko a drink. She had barely started flirting, yet he had already taken the bait. She knew that men like him could be easily manipulated with a delicate and innocent persona. The bar owner recognized her, so she discreetly signaled him to play along, and he, being quite experienced in such matters, did so immediately. Upon observing the man, she deduced that he was the type who prided himself on being charming, so she decided to toy with his ego. She portrayed herself as a naive and clueless newcomer to the area, which only made him more infatuated. Realizing she had spoken a bit too much, she blamed it on being tipsy and signaled the bartender to stay quiet. She then began her seduction, and the man introduced himself as Yuuki, someone with a stable life and decent finances. Yoko casually complimented his muscles, prompting him to boast about his strength and frequent gym workouts. However, Yoko found muscles unimpressive, thinking that learning martial arts would be far more useful. Since she had successfully lured him in, she decided to leave. Yuuki gave her his business card, hoping to see her again. As he remained enamored, the bartender looked at him with nothing but pity. Yoko decided she would toy with Yuuki for 3 months since she had free time anyway. Meanwhile, Hashi was at the crime scene cleaning up bloodstains while haunted by nightmares about Kojima. Akira later asked Yoko if she knew of any stores that sold knives, as he planned to use his days off to train in the mountains. She also informed him that Takeshi had recently been hospitalized. At the hospital, Takeshi met with Kojima, who revealed his plan to start a brothel. However, Takeshi warned that such a business would interfere with other gangs' operations and told Kojima to wait until he was discharged in a month before making any moves. Kojima later met with Kuro, as the two had known each other in the past. Kojima wanted Kuro to find him some attractive women for his brothel business, but Kuro warned that this would infringe upon the territory of a senior member in the company who was also running a similar operation. However, Kojima reassured Kuro not to worry. Meanwhile, Misaki was struggling with designing a flyer for a zoo, as she needed to make it feel pleasant and inviting. She then had Akira try drawing some animals, and although his sketches resembled a child's drawings, they carried a sense of warmth and familiarity, making them a perfect fit for the flyer. Elsewhere, Kuro informed Kojima of a potential candidate, Misaki. Since she was in desperate need of money, she would be easy to lure in. Kuro also knew that Misaki had previously been forced into the adult film industry but had since quit. Kojima, intrigued, insisted that Kuro recruit her at any cost. Meanwhile, Hashi was still haunted by the debtor's death. Kojima advised him to relieve stress by visiting a brothel and, in the process, recruit women for him. Hashi, aware of Kojima's plan to start a brothel, asked if Takeshi had approved. Kojima, however, was keeping it a secret, planning to reveal it only once he had generated enough money for the gang, at which point, he believed, no one would object. The following morning, Sugawa, the boss in charge of the company's brothel business, learned that someone had been trespassing in his area. Upon hearing the description, he immediately recognized Kajima. One evening, when Misaki returned home, she ran into Kajima, who wasted no time and outright invited her to become an escort. Naturally, she refused, even when he promised her 10 times her current income. When she still declined, he revealed that 3 years ago, Kuro had once tried to recruit her, and more recently, Kuro had been severely injured while protecting her from another recruitment attempt. Specifically, the entertainment company she had previously worked for wanted to bring her back for another film, but Kuro intervened, demanding they leave her alone, resulting in him getting his leg broken. Although Kajima was exaggerating, he claimed that, as a senior, he had a duty to secure income sources for his juniors. He proposed that if Misaki worked for just 1 year, Kuro would be financially secure, and she herself would earn a substantial sum. However, if she refused, he reminded her that he was Yakuza and could easily make life miserable for her loved ones, essentially threatening her. He gave her until the next day to think it over. Meanwhile, Sugawa met with Hiroshi to discuss Kajima disrupting his business and requested permission to eliminate him. However, Hiroshi refused, stating that the era of settling debts with blood was over. Still, he agreed to take action if Sugawa could provide concrete evidence of Kajima's interference. The next morning, after careful consideration, Misaki resolved never to accept Kajima's offer. At work, she sent Akira's drawings to the client, who approved them. As a result, Akira's salary was increased, and Misaki invited him out for a celebratory meal, much to the dismay of their bitter director. Meanwhile, Takeshi began feeling uneasy about Kajima's promises. While dining with Misaki, Akira was asked about his survival experiences in the wilderness. He admitted that it was harsh, but also had its benefits beyond the daily struggles of finding food, water, and shelter. The nighttime sounds of nature and scenic views were quite relaxing. He wasn't afraid of snakes but disliked lice and mosquitoes. These experiences also heightened his ability to sense danger and avoid it. Suddenly, Takeshi texted Akira, requesting a meeting. As Akira continued eating with Misaki, he noticed that she seemed different from usual. He reassured her that if she was struggling, she could confide in him. After all, he owed her for helping him find a job. However, Misaki remained silent. Meanwhile, Hashi was at Sugawa's establishment when Sugawa himself unexpectedly confronted him. Sugawa had discovered that Hashi had been recruiting his women for Kajima over the past few days. Aware that a careless response could get him killed on the spot, Hashi quickly promised to arrange a meeting between Kajima and Sugawa if possible. Akira went to the hospital to meet Takeshi, who requested his help in investigating Kajima. Akira recounted his previous encounter with Kajima and refused, suggesting that Takeshi send his subordinates instead. However, Kuro was injured, and Hashi was now entangled with Kajima, leaving Takeshi with no other choice but to ask Akira. Takeshi only needed him to investigate a warehouse and hinted that Akira would benefit greatly if Takeshi owed him a favor. Reluctantly, Akira agreed. Meanwhile, Misaki unexpectedly received news that her boss was injured, allowing her to take the day off. Akira then infiltrated Takeshi's warehouse and discovered various things. He later left and spoke in a roundabout way to Takeshi, ensuring he wouldn't leave any evidence over the phone. He confirmed that Kajima was running a prostitution ring and subtly hinted that someone had been burned by fireworks in that room. Takeshi understood that Kajima had killed someone. Akira then stated that he wouldn't get further involved and left the rest to Takeshi. Meanwhile, Misaki confronted Kajima about her boss being hospitalized. Kajima feigned ignorance but warned her that worse things would come. Unexpectedly, Takeshi sneaked out of the hospital to find Akira, asking him to investigate further and offering a car as payment. Takeshi knew Akira had no need for cars or money, but this was his way of showing sincerity. He couldn't allow Sugawa and Kajima to start a bloodbath, nor could he report to Hiroshi, as that would mean certain death for Kajima. Meanwhile, Sugawa sought out an assassin to eliminate Kajima. He met with the hitman and requested 2 targets, the first being Kajima, while the second remained a secret. At the same time, the company director secretly installed a hidden camera in Misaki's home. Meanwhile, Misaki visited Yoko and Akira. Upon hearing that Yoko was around, paid little attention as he was busy fixing the car. During a test drive, he realized that while the car wasn't particularly fast, it was easy to see why Takeshi was so fond of it. Misaki asked Yoko about her past jobs, to which Yoko replied that her work hadn't been particularly clean, though she didn't care much about it. This led Misaki to some slight misunderstandings about Yoko's words. Meanwhile, the president of Akira and Misaki's workplace was suddenly attacked on his way home by two thugs hired by Kojima. Akira then sneaked into Takeshi's home to check if his gun was still there. If it was, he would keep it for safekeeping. He also requested to reinstall the 6 hidden cameras he had previously removed to monitor Kojima. Just then, Kojima returned, forcing Akira to slip away. Kojima noticed signs of an intruder and began searching the area. Meanwhile, the company director, watching Misaki through the hidden cameras, realized that someone was threatening her. Shortly after, he received a call from the hospital. Kojima was then summoned by Sugawa. During their conversation, Kojima mentioned forcing Misaki into the trade, and Akira unintentionally overheard. The next morning, when Akira and Misaki arrived at work, the director informed them that the president had been hospitalized, likely due to an attack by thugs. While the injuries weren't severe, the director suspected a connection to Misaki, as her boss at another workplace had also been targeted. Misaki apologized and left, while Akira quickly pressured the director to spill everything. He was fully aware that the director had been secretly recording Misaki, but had no intention of exposing him. Instead, he wanted the footage to find a way to help her. However, the director revealed that the case involved the Yakuza. Meanwhile, the assassin hired by Sugawa discussed with his associates about the legendary hitman Fable. Given how much money this small gang was making, they speculated that a high-caliber assassin like Fable must be supporting them. If they encountered Fable during this job, the hitman wanted to challenge him to a duel. That evening, Akira went out shopping for supplies. Later that night, Misaki met with Kojima, who presented her with 2 contracts. If she worked only as an escort, she would be bound for a year, but if she also managed the gambling den, she would only need to work for 3 months. Akira showed Yoko that he was crafting a gun barrel and modifying some dummy rounds. He also had a request for her. Meanwhile, Kojima presented the contracts to Misaki, and she chose the 3-month option. Kojima asked when she planned to start working, and then drove her home, instructing her to prepare thoroughly for his arrival the next day. Hashi later met with Yoko, who gifted him a watch and invited him out the next day. A few sweet words were enough for Hashi to fall into Yoko's trap and accept the watch, though he had to decline the outing due to prior commitments. Yoko then asked Akira why he wanted to plant a tracker on Hashi instead of just tailing him. Akira explained that Kojima was too sharp for traditional surveillance. This time, he only intended to carry out a rescue mission and wanted to keep Misaki from discovering his true identity. He then finished modifying the dummy rounds, which lacked gunpowder, preventing recoil while also reducing power and lethality. However, for someone like him, they were just enough to handle the situation. Yoko questioned why he was helping Misaki, asking if he had fallen for her, but Akira said he didn't understand such emotions. He simply felt indebted to Yoko, and seeing Misaki happy made him feel better. Yoko agreed to help him this time since she was also friends with Misaki. Meanwhile, Hashi returned to Kojima, and they planned to meet Sugawa the next night to negotiate and sell Misaki to him. If Sugawa refused Misaki's 3-month contract, conflict was inevitable. Kojima also intended to push Misaki to her absolute limit. He then tossed Hashi a toy gun, telling him to use it for intimidation depending on how it was handled. Others might perceive it as real or fake. Around this time, Akira received a call from Misaki, asking him to inform the director of her resignation. Akira reminded Misaki of the times he owed her from when she gave him a towel, helped him find work, and even secured him a raise. In response, Misaki asked him to draw a picture of her. Akira promised to do so and deliver it the next day. She mentioned that she might not be able to pick it up until the day after, but Akira assured her she would receive it tomorrow. The following morning, Akira visited the company and informed the president of Misaki's resignation. The director, however, questioned him about Misaki's situation. Meanwhile, Sugawa met with the hitman to finalize their plan. The hitman handed Sugawa a pen that emitted a mosquito-like sound, a frequency only those under 25 could hear. When Sugawa activated it, the hitman would eliminate Kojima, while his accomplices subdued Kojima's men. Elsewhere, Misaki called her mother to inform her that she would try to pay off her father's debt by next year. Kojima then called, instructing her to dress nicely and wait for him. Akira returned home, where Yoko helped him prepare. She would be joining the mission and decided to take a shower, as Hashi had begun moving. Shortly after, Kojima arrived to pick up Misaki, while Akira and Yoko quickly set off as well. At the same time, Takeshi, still in the hospital, was unexpectedly visited by Akira's boss, who came to confront Takeshi for dragging Akira into this mess. As Kojima's group arrived at their meeting with Sugawa, they were searched for weapons. However, Kojima noticed an unfamiliar face among Sugawa's men. Outside, Akira observed the situation, while his boss awaited Takeshi's response. Takeshi had no excuse and was prepared to accept any punishment. Inside, Sugawa took Kojima upstairs for negotiations, while his men were given permission to use Misaki as they pleased. Akira's boss realized that Takeshi had no idea what Akira was about to do. Meanwhile, Sugawa questioned Kojima about a missing subordinate, suspecting that Kojima knew something about it. Misaki, now trapped, was being assaulted by one of Sugawa's men, while a member of Kojima's crew outside began to pity her. The hitman's accomplice believed that he was getting paid for a job he didn't even like, calling it hypocrisy. Meanwhile, Akira snuck into Misaki's location and knocked out Sugawa's underling to rescue her. Hearing that Misaki was in distress, Yoko urged Akira to help her calm down. Akira then noticed 3 more enemies outside. If he were allowed to kill, he could handle them quickly, but since that wasn't an option, he had to find another way. Sugawa, on the other hand, wanted Kojima to reveal his hand, as he already knew Kojima had killed his subordinate. He had been tipped off that a scar-faced man had visited his underling's apartment, so Kojima didn't bother denying it. Sugawa immediately activated the signal, prompting his large enforcer to strike. Akira had already suspected that Sugawa planned to eliminate Kojima from the start. Meanwhile, Akira's boss revealed his plan to make Akira take a year off from being an assassin so his skills would deteriorate. If Akira agreed to retire after that, the boss would allow him to leave the assassin world. However, Takeshi had disrupted this plan. The boss then pulled out a Rambo knife, an iconic survival knife from the 80s, though now obsolete. He compared Akira to this knife, outdated in the modern world. Still, he couldn't discard Akira, so he decided to give Takeshi a warning and left. At that moment, Akira rushed in to protect the masked man, engaging in combat with the large enforcer. Kojima and Hashi also drew their guns, ready to fight. The camo-clad hitman advised Sugawa to set Kojima aside, as they had uninvited guests. Akira ordered the masked man to escort Misaki to safety, insisting that it was his duty to protect her at all costs. He mentioned the mosquito sound, telling him that once it stopped, it would signal their safe escape. Yoko then called Akira for an update. He informed her that one enemy was neutralized and that once the mosquito sound ended, he would need her to guard Misaki and her escort. Akira then threw Yoko's smoke bombs down below to confront the camo-clad assassin. The large enforcer upstairs recognized Akira as Fable and alerted his comrades. Akira's smoke bombs quickly filled the area, and he managed to shoot the hitman. However, the hitman realized Akira was using dummy rounds. Despite this, he remained cautious, knowing that Akira was skilled enough to fight even with fake bullets. Akira swiftly closed the distance, incapacitated the hitman, and took his gun to shoot Kojima as well. He then stormed inside, dragged Kojima out, and shot out the mosquito sound emitter. Seeing this, Misaki and the masked man quickly made their exit. Akira took Kojima back to the car, where Yoko wanted confirmation that he hadn't killed anyone. Akira wasn't entirely sure, as the man he had knocked out earlier still hadn't regained consciousness. He remarked that using a gun was sometimes easier for controlling casualties than hand-to-hand combat. The masked man advised Misaki to call the police if she ever found herself in a similar situation again, and assured her that Hashi's group wouldn't bother her anymore. He told her not to worry, as he was now her ally. Meanwhile, the 2 hitmen informed Sugawa about Fable, helping him understand just how formidable Akira was. They didn't know if Fable was connected to Kojima, but it was clear he wasn't hired by him. Elsewhere, Kojima regained consciousness and came face to face with Akira and his brother. The masked man escorted Misaki home and gave her his phone number in case she ever needed help. She was still shaken by everything that had happened. The 2 hitmen then suggested that Sugawa let Kojima go for now, as there was still another target that needed dealing with. Sugawa agreed and dismissed Hashi. He still didn't know who had hired Fable to interfere. Sugawa then executed the underling that Akira had knocked out earlier, covering up loose ends about his second assassination target. The two hitmen knew Sugawa would eventually eliminate them too, but for now, they still held some value to him. Kojima met Takeshi, who asked him about the business instructions he had given and the gun issue. Kojima knew he had made a mistake, but Takeshi assured him he would handle the situation with both him and Sugawa. Akira, curious about why Kojima had been in prison for 15 years, was told that Kojima had once killed a woman. Takeshi didn't blame him for that since the woman wasn't exactly a good person. But this time, the person he had harmed was an innocent woman. Takeshi understood where Kojima's violent tendencies stemmed from his impotence. Typically, when people get out of prison, they indulge in food and women, but Kojima had discovered his dysfunction after strangling the woman 15 years ago. Takeshi then told Akira to leave so he could speak privately with Kojima. Kojima had now confirmed that Akira was indeed Fable, the figure associated with the company's dealings. Meanwhile, Akira visited Yoko's place to begin sketching Misaki. Takeshi, having promised to help Kojima through this, listened to Kojima's apology attempt but reassured him that everything would be fine before shooting him in the head. When Akira later arrived, Takeshi instructed him to stay on the second floor with Yoko for the night and wait for the cleanup crew, advising him not to return until the next day if he wanted to stay out of it. Takeshi asked Akira what he thought about the situation, to which Akira replied that if he hadn't done it, Kojima would have been killed earlier anyway. That night, Misaki unexpectedly dropped by, feeling cold, so Yoko suggested she take a hot bath to warm up. Akira was present, and Yoko immediately understood why he had to stay. Meanwhile, Takeshi called the arms dealer to handle the body disposal and questioned him about whether he had sold the gun to Kojima. The dealer feigned ignorance. Initially, the dealer planned to chop Kojima into pieces and feed him to the fish, but Takeshi insisted on giving Kojima a proper burial, as he had still been one of his men. Though this would be more expensive, Takeshi was willing to pay. While this was happening, Akira and Yoko found Misaki unconscious in the bathroom. Yoko refused to let Akira enter, but when she realized Misaki was too heavy to carry alone, she had no choice but to ask for his help. The next morning, when Misaki woke up, she found Yoko drunk and was informed of what had happened the previous night. Akira had carried her to her room. Embarrassed that Akira had seen her naked, she blushed, but Yoko dismissed it as no big deal before dozing off. Meanwhile, Takeshi met with Sugawa, settling Kojima's death as payment for Sugawa's underling's death. Regarding Sugawa's financial losses, Takeshi suggested using the money Kojima's underling owed as compensation. Sugawa argued that Takeshi had acted on his own since he had only intended to make Kojima work off his debt, but Takeshi pointed out that Sugawa had hired 2 men to kill Kojima. Sugawa then inquired about Fable, noting that only Takeshi and Hiroshi seemed to know about this organization. Takeshi played dumb but subtly warned Sugawa that knowing too much about Fable was dangerous, implying that not everyone had the privilege of such information. Sugawa relented, and Takeshi made it clear that from now on, Misaki was off limits. He then handed Misaki's bag to Hashi and told him to return it to her. Akira returned to his room, while Misaki, looking at Akira's sketches of her, was shocked to find a drawing depicting him carrying her to her room the previous night. Meanwhile, Takeshi summoned Kuro, instructing him to keep silent about Fable, as Sugawa might start digging. He warned that if word got out, even the entire company wouldn't be able to pay the price. Kuro understood and swore to keep quiet. Takeshi also reprimanded Kuro for dragging Misaki into prostitution, stating that even in the underworld, there were lines that shouldn't be crossed. Kuro later questioned the masked man and Hashi about Akira's actions that night. Though he nearly let some details slip, he managed to keep control and urged them to investigate the masked figure, as most believed Kojima had been abducted by him. Meanwhile, Akira grilled fish on the rooftop, enjoying the peaceful moment. The next day, when he arrived at work, he found that the director and president had just installed a new TV. Misaki returned to work, but Akira noticed that she seemed to be avoiding him. He later told Yoko about it, and Yoko didn't think Misaki had realized that Akira was the one who saved her. However, Akira believed that if Misaki truly recognized him, then he was a failure and would have to erase his identity and disappear. Meanwhile, Sugawa met with the arms dealer and brought up Kojima's death. The dealer acted surprised, but Sugawa knew he was pretending. Sugawa's real purpose for coming was to ask about the assassin known as Fable. The dealer continued feigning ignorance, so Sugawa offered money for information and presented a bullet used by Fable the night before. The dealer explained that Fable had been in the assassin world for a long time and was considered a legend, a killer for hire organization best left alone. If Sugawa wanted to learn more, he would have to rise to Takeshi's level. Meanwhile, Akira went to a store to buy a knife, as he was planning to survive in the mountains for a few days. He told the shop owner that he once had a knife just like the one he was holding, but a bear had taken it from him. He had stabbed it in the eye, causing it to flee with his knife still embedded. The shop owner thought he was joking, so Akira played along. At the same time, Kiro visited Yoko and revealed that he knew about Fable. However, he assured her that he wasn't an enemy. He simply wanted Akira to accept him as a disciple. Yoko stated that Akira wasn't interested in taking in students, so Kiro asked if there were any other positions available within the organization. She pointed out that Kiro already had a stable position in Hiroshi's company, so why would he want to throw that away to follow Akira? But Kiro was willing to abandon everything to become Akira's apprentice. Yoko informed him that Akira was heading into the mountains for survival training and suggested he asked to tag along. Kiro thanked her and waited for Akira's return. When Akira arrived, Kiro gave him a CD he had recently noticed in an idol's film. Akira also observed that Kiro had removed his cast. Kiro then brought up Akira's upcoming trip to the mountains and asked to go with him, assuring Akira that he wouldn't be a burden and would operate independently if needed. Akira agreed but strictly warned him not to litter in the mountains. He later told Yoko about his decision, and Yoko said it was fine. Kiro wouldn't be able to keep up with him anyway. Once Kiro realized the overwhelming difference in skill, he would likely give up. Yoko then mentioned that the boss had sent something for Akira and asked if he wanted to eat her cooking. Akira agreed, but seeing that the food was hot, asked Yoko to cool it down for him since his tongue was sensitive. He explained that during his past survival experiences, he had once eaten something poisonous and had been paralyzed for 3 days. Since then, his tongue had become highly sensitive, helping him distinguish between safe and unsafe food. Meanwhile, the director was frustrated about Akira stealing his hidden footage of Misaki. He couldn't figure out how Akira had discovered his spying or how the Yakuza had dealt with Misaki. Later, Misaki unexpectedly visited Yoko's place to return some clothes, but Yoko pulled her inside for a chat. She brought up how Misaki had been distant from Akira and then showed her the drawings he had made, reminding her that he had seen her naked. At the same time, Akira was checking what the boss had sent him when Takeshi suddenly called. Takeshi informed Akira that he had been discharged from the hospital and mentioned that his boss had come to see him. He also asked whether Akira still planned to return to work after a year. Akira confirmed that he did because he wasn't suited for anything else. The next day, Kiro met with Akira to review the route for the mountain trip. Early the following morning, Yoko drove them to the mountain. When they got out of the car, Akira noticed that Kiro had brought an excessive amount of gear, looking more like he was going on a camping trip rather than a survival challenge. Akira only carried a few essentials, so Kiro wanted to imitate him, but Yoko pointed out that Akira was built differently and Kiro shouldn't try to copy him. She then asked Akira to pick out the necessary items to ensure Kiro's survival in the forest, so he selected enough gear for Kiro to carry. With that settled, the two officially entered the forest. Akira told Yoko that if they didn't return in 3 days, she could leave as she wished. As they trekked deeper into the woods, Kiro soon grew tired. Akira explained that walking in the forest was much more exhausting than walking in the city, not to mention that he knew Kiro had removed his cast too early. To help, Akira made a temporary walking stick for Kiro. Later, they encountered a wild boar. Akira noted that a boar of that size could still injure them, so he chose to take a different route instead of confronting it. However, as they changed paths, they came across a snake. Akira swiftly grabbed it and slammed it against a tree, securing their dinner. Kiro was surprised. He had assumed they would forage for edible plants, but Akira reminded him that this was survival, not a camping trip. They would eat whatever was available. Eventually, they reached a river, which would serve as their base for the next few days. Akira was slightly impressed that Kiro had managed to keep up despite his leg injury, though he knew he could have arrived much sooner if he had been alone. Akira then went off to gather fire-starting materials, instructing Kiro to collect stones for a cooking pit. Kiro was starving but found the idea of eating snake repulsive. When Akira returned, he brought back a specific type of fungus that could be used to start a fire. Although Kiro had a lighter, Akira insisted on using primitive methods. He roasted the snake and told Kiro to set up the tent before nightfall. Kiro thought they still had plenty of daylight left, but Akira warned him that night fell quickly in the forest. By the time Akira returned, the snake was well cooked. He took a bite and offered Kiro a taste. Kiro initially refused, claiming he wasn't hungry, but Akira saw through the lie. Kiro admitted that he wasn't fond of eating snakes, but Akira told him to think of it as a source of nutrition rather than a snake. Mustering his will, Kiro took a bite and found it surprisingly palatable. Soon, night had completely set in. Kiro helped Akira finish setting up their sleeping area. Later, Akira attached his Rambo knife sent by his boss to a wooden pole, turning it into a makeshift spear. He advised Kiro to sleep early and be cautious of bears and other nocturnal predators. As Kiro settled in his tent, he realized it was still early. Had he been in the city, he would have been out drinking with his crew and some women at a bar. He sat in his tent for a while before finally lying down. Suddenly, he heard noises outside. Uncertain about what was approaching, he grabbed his knife and stepped out only to find Akira returning with another snake for a late-night meal. Akira even remarked that venomous snakes tasted better than regular ones. Kiro eventually fell asleep and woke up the next morning to find Akira already awake. Akira informed him that there were bear tracks near their tent and confirmed that at least one bear was in the area. Kiro suggested playing dead if they encountered one, but Akira told him to go ahead and try if he ended up dead for real. It wouldn't be bad luck, just stupidity. He emphasized never to turn his back on a bear. Under normal circumstances, most people would choose to descend the mountain at this point, but Akira had no such intention. Later, the two went to catch some frogs, and Akira instructed Kiro to return to camp and start the fire while he gathered insects. Kiro, however, asked him to bring back more snakes instead. On the way back, Kiro suddenly noticed his belongings scattered along the path. Realizing what it meant, he quickly turned around and saw the bear approaching. Remembering Akira's warning about not turning his back, Kiro hesitated over whether to play dead. Panicking, he ended up falling backward in an attempt to feign death. The bear cautiously approached to inspect him just as Akira arrived and scared it away. Back at camp, Kiro apologized for losing his composure and burdening Akira with saving him. Akira simply told him to eat some grasshoppers since they contained more nutrients than beef or pork. Akira believed that the ability to eat anything could be crucial in case of a disaster, ensuring survival when food was scarce. Most people never prepared for every possible scenario, and the ones he had killed often shared the same expression, one of disbelief, as if they couldn't comprehend why such a fate had befallen them. Kiro then mentioned that the bear had buried his belongings underground, leading Akira to realize that it would definitely return to retrieve them. Kiro insisted that the items were his, but from the bear's perspective, they were not. However, simply throwing his backpack to the bear was not an option. Doing so would make it lose respect for humans, leading it to attack others in the future. Therefore, they needed to teach the bear that humans were terrifying. That said, some bears feared nothing. Akira then asked Kiro for some of his hair, explaining that burning it would be an excellent way to attract snakes. After cutting Kiro's hair in an absurd manner, he managed to find a snake right underneath Kiro's tent. Meanwhile, Yoko contacted Yuuki, arranging to meet at a bar that evening. Back in the forest, Kiro noticed Akira extracting venom from the snake, planning to use it to ward off the bear. The amount of venom he collected would be enough to make the bear suffer greatly, teaching it to fear humans and stay away. Later, Kiro watched Akira prepare the snake for eating, becoming intrigued when he realized that venomous snakes were indeed delicious. Meanwhile, Yoko was planning to toy with Yuuki before drugging him, just to watch him crawl helplessly in front of her. On the mountain, Kiro had been away from civilization for so long that he started hallucinating, seeing women everywhere. He was shocked that he was experiencing such urges right when Akira was explaining bear survival tactics. Yuuki arrived at the bar earlier than expected, asking the owner to help him woo Yoko. He still believed himself to be a master seducer, unaware that he was actually the one being played. The bartender could only hope that Yuuki survived the night unscathed. Back in the forest, Kiro tried his best to focus on Akira's instructions while struggling to conceal his growing problem. Akira soon noticed that the bear was approaching, and Kuro suggested using fire to drive it away. However, the flames they had were too weak to intimidate it. Akira, seeing Kuro awkwardly hunched over, told him not to be embarrassed. It happened to anyone who ate too many snakes. He then told Kuro to brace himself, as they were about to teach the bear to fear humans. Meanwhile, Yoko and Yuuki finally met at the bar. The bartender sensed that the night would be intense, as both were seasoned manipulators who thrived on deception. They were formidable and not easy to handle. First, there was Yuuki, the most shameless womanizer the bar had ever seen. The bartender had witnessed countless women cry because of him. Then there was Yoko, a mysterious newcomer with an irresistible allure that captivated men. Yoko struck first, pretending to have a low alcohol tolerance and apologizing in advance if she said anything foolish. Yuuki then ordered drinks for both of them, signaling the bartender to prepare a strong cocktail for him as usual, but with an adjusted alcohol level to make him more resistant to intoxication. However, the bartender decided to play fair, ensuring both drinks had the same alcohol content. Meanwhile, Akira coated his knife with snake venom in preparation for battle. Yoko, fully aware that Yuuki was a seasoned player, was excited to turn him into her personal toy. She continued to feign shyness, drawing Yuuki in. Completely falling for it, Yuuki was convinced that he would take Yoko to a hotel that night. The bartender watched as both of them continuously tested each other. Yoko then casually brought up her personal life, mentioning that she had a sickly older brother who had gone camping in the mountains, giving her some free time to drink the night away. Yuuki assured her that he would personally see her home safely. As their conversation drifted to camping and barbecue parties, Yoko suddenly recalled her love for lemons and signaled the bartender to bring her a lemon-based drink. The bartender served a tequila shot, explaining that people usually bit into a lemon slice afterward to enhance the flavor. Finding it enjoyable, Yoko ordered another round, and the bartender began to notice that it was Yuuki, not Yoko, who was gradually being ensnared. As Kuro and Akira braced themselves, the bear drew dangerously close before lunging at Kuro. Akira swiftly stabbed it with a spear, then tied the spear to a tent rope and launched it at the bear, forcing it to flee. Akira was confident that the bear had now learned to fear humans. Kuro was astonished at how effortlessly Akira handled the situation. Meanwhile, Yoko had downed her 20th drink, and it was clear that Yuuki had lost. Yuuki soon had to run off to vomit, much like Hashi once did. Yoko returned to the bar to relish Yuuki's pathetic state. Stumbling outside in search of support, Yuuki collapsed onto the floor, prompting the bartender to call an ambulance. However, Yuuki overheard this and stubbornly refused to let Yoko leave just yet. In his drunken stupor, he blurted out every embarrassing thought in his head, much to Yoko's amusement. She then handed him another drink, deceitfully claiming it was water. Yuuki chugged it down, only to end up suffering from alcohol poisoning again. As Yoko left, the bartender was left in disbelief. Never did he think the infamous playboy Yuuki would one day face such a humiliating defeat. The next morning, Yoko went up the mountain to pick up Akira and Kuro. As they descended, Kuro got stung by a bee, causing his nose to swell. On their way back, they stumbled upon a detective agency. Inside, a wealthy old woman was seeking documents on past accidents at a children's amusement park. She intended to present them to the city council to push for better safety measures. However, despite its outward appearance, the agency was actually a half-baked Yakuza group. The so-called detective then took a new recruit to his real workplace, a forest, where they were about to bury a spoiled rich kid alive. This young man, the heir of an ultra-wealthy family, had done nothing but squander his family's fortune. The detective had impersonated him to scam his mother out of 10 million yen, lying that he was traveling across Southeast Asia to find himself. This way, the mother would continue waiting for a son who would never return. His grand scheme was to cultivate more delinquent heirs like this one, using them to extort money from their own families without raising suspicion. The key members of this detective agency included Detective Utsubo, the new recruit Asaki, a thug named Suzuki, and a woman named Hina. Utsubo believed that 4 members were the ideal number. Too many would lead to internal strife, but too few would lack manpower. He then arranged temporary lodging for Asaki and noted that Asaki was a former employee of the Hiroshi Corporation. Utsubo instructed Suzuki to handle Asaki if he showed any signs of disloyalty. Moreover, Atsubo was aware of Fable and had already gathered significant intel on him. He declared that if they ever crossed paths with Fable, he would conduct thorough investigations before making a move. Meanwhile, Akira had just completed a delivery and was heading back. Misaki, unsure of how to face him due to his extreme indifference, hesitated to approach him. On his way out, Akira unexpectedly encountered Hina. He immediately recalled meeting her during an assassination years ago. Noticing him, Hina quickly turned away and left. At the same time, Isaki reunited with Kuro, as the two had once been close friends. Isaki inquired about the gang's current state, but Kuro dismissed the question, stating that Isaki had already left the gang, so there was no need to ask about the higher-ups. Meanwhile, Akira decided to grab a meal with Yoko. He asked her to investigate an assassination he carried out 4 years ago. Yoko suggested he do it himself, but since he was busy with work, he left it to her, knowing she had nothing better to do. Yoko, however, suspected Akira was about to get involved in some kind of conflict again. As they ate, Yoko scooped rice onto a plate and noticed Akira wasn't eating. Assuming he needed it to be cooled down, she offered to blow on it. But in reality, Akira had stopped eating because Yoko had added way too much salt. When she tasted it herself, she realized it was unbearably salty. Isaki later returned to the agency, where Suzuki asked if he had a wife or kids, to which he replied no. Isaki then curiously asked how old Suzuki was, as he looked quite young. Atsubo soon arrived, questioning Isaki about his former gang, but Isaki had found no useful information. Atsubo then revealed a surprising fact. Despite his youthful appearance, Suzuki was actually 40 years old. Atsubo then presented the file of their next target for investigation. He wanted both Isaki and Suzuki to gather as much information as possible, including any potential weaknesses the target might have. To their surprise, the target this time was none other than Akira's director. Meanwhile, Akira arrived at work, where the chairman asked if he and Misaki had been arguing lately. Akira wasn't sure, so the chairman advised him to compliment Misaki later, as she had recently refreshed her appearance. When Akira met Misaki again, he merely complimented her outfit, but then likened her to a venomous snake, making her think he had no interest in her. Shortly after, the director arrived and complimented her newly cut short hair. Akira then left for a delivery, while the chairman tried to ease Misaki's mood. That night, Misaki had to work late, and the director planned to visit her home again to switch memory cards and secretly record more footage of her. If the opportunity arose, he was even prepared to ambush her inside, stun her with a taser, and assault her. The chairman invited him for a drink, but the director declined and left. At the same time, Akira went to see Yoko for updates on the investigation. She complained that he always showed up when she was cooking. Yoko then listed several incidents from June 4 years ago. Akira confirmed one of them, a case where he assassinated a man inside a car, causing the vehicle to crash out of the parking garage. Another case on the list was also his doing. Both of these targets had been part of a human trafficking ring. He recalled encountering a crying girl inside the car during the assassination, likely a victim of the man he had eliminated. The reason this case intrigued him was that he suspected he was responsible for the accident that left Hina disabled. According to Yoko, Hina was a runaway who never returned home after the incident. Meanwhile, the director stealthily approached Misaki's home, only to find that she had changed the locks, preventing him from breaking in. As he left, he accidentally dropped his taser and duct tape, which Isaki happened to witness. After assessing the situation, Isaki realized the director was targeting Misaki and reported it to Atsubo. Atsubo knew the director had grown up in immense wealth, accustomed to getting everything he wanted. However, a past incident had shattered this illusion, turning him into an obsessive stalker. Since the director had already seen Isaki's face, Atsubo decided to switch their roles, assigning Suzuki to handle the matter instead. However, Isaki was unsure of Suzuki's whereabouts at the moment. Suzuki, in the meantime, had sought out 2 hitmen working for Sugawa to exchange information about Fable. However, the discussion quickly escalated into conflict. Without hesitation, Suzuki shot the larger hitman first, using his body as a shield to corner the other. In response, the second hitman shot his own injured partner in the leg, causing him to collapse. As he attempted to evade Suzuki's fire and counterattack, Suzuki landed another shot, swiftly taking him down. After effortlessly dealing with both enemies, Suzuki noticed a surveillance camera, raised his glass in a mock toast, and casually left. Elsewhere, Akira unexpectedly encountered Hina at a playground, still undergoing rehabilitation. He chatted with her for a while and, based on his observation, believed she could walk again soon if she remained diligent in her training. Sugawa later learned that Suzuki had killed his 2 subordinates but remained indifferent, as he had already planned to dispose of them. He also decided to stop investigating Fable any further, not wanting unnecessary trouble. Meanwhile, Akira showed the chairman and Misaki some of his recent drawings. The artwork made them laugh uncontrollably, lightening Misaki's mood, though the director was far from pleased. On his way home, the director fumed over how Akira had managed to make Misaki smile. Confident in his martial arts skills, he decided to confront Akira in a fight to vent his frustration. At the same time, Suzuki noticed Hina returning home in a bad mood. When he asked what was bothering her, she complained about being repeatedly approached at her rehabilitation center. Wanting to act like an older brother, Suzuki asked for a description of the person bothering her so he could take care of it. The man then went looking for Akira and found him at the playground, waiting for Hina. He demanded that Akira stay away from Hina and even called him a pervert. After kicking Akira once, he walked away, leaving Akira wondering why even showing concern for others would get him insulted. Meanwhile, Utsubo and Asaki visited Misaki's house and mentioned the recent issue of hidden cameras. They offered to check her home for free, and she led them to her room for inspection. Both quickly realized why the director was obsessed with her. She was far too careless. Misaki then stepped out to inform her boss that she would be late, while Akira went to eat at Yoko's house. Akira asked Yoko whether Hina had any siblings, and she said no. This surprised Akira since he had just been kicked by a man claiming to be Hina's brother, someone who bore a striking resemblance to him, a hitman. Meanwhile, Utsubo found the director's hidden camera and asked for permission to check Misaki's bathroom as well. Once he gathered enough evidence, he concluded that the director had terrible risk management. He then instructed Hina to find a nearby rental, as they would be monitoring the director's workplace for a week. The next day, Utsubo left the house and told Asaki that the Women's Association wanted to install additional safety measures at the playground. Utsubo believed that overprotective parents were making children weak and vulnerable, which, in turn, provided him with more targets. While physical strength could be trained, a fragile mindset caused by excessive sheltering was different, and that was what he aimed for. Meanwhile, Akira arrived at work, where the chairman asked him to design a Christmas flyer. Since the previous zoo-themed design was popular with clients, they wanted him to continue in the same style. However, Akira had no idea what Santa Claus or reindeer were since he had never seen them before. The chairman promised him a raise, so he agreed to look into it. The director, growing irritated with Akira, planned to attack him after work. If Akira disappeared, his hidden cameras would remain undiscovered, and he could continue breaking into Misaki's house. That evening, he waited at the playground Akira often visited and prepared to strike. But Akira noticed him, forcing him to flee. Later that night, Akira pondered over Santa Claus and tried drawing him. He questioned who Santa really was, why he delivered presents on Christmas Eve, and why he rode a sleigh pulled by reindeer. Meanwhile, the chairman visited a bar and told the owner how he had hired Akira. He also showed her Akira's drawings to help her understand him better. At the same time, Akira visited Yoko and asked if she had any memories of Santa Claus. She said she used to meet Santa every year because she always received presents on Christmas Eve. However, when she was 10, she realized Santa was actually her mother, but she pretended not to notice. Her mother seemed to understand but also played along. That continued until the fire that took everything from her. She then blamed Akira for making her recall painful memories and asked about his own memories of Santa. Akira admitted that he had no recollection of his parents and only remembered his life after being taken in by his boss. He had only learned about Santa Claus recently and had always assumed he was just a strange old man. He had never experienced waking up to presents, but he wondered if it was truly as exciting as people said. Yoko smiled, explaining that parents pretended to be Santa to let their children live in a dream, while children pretended to believe in Santa to make their parents happy. She then felt sad reminiscing about the past, and Akira tried to slip away, but she stopped him and made him stay for another drink. The next morning, Akira brought his drawing to the chairman, but it looked the same as before. The chairman encouraged him to relax and draw with a more joyful mindset. Akira then went out for a delivery, coincidentally arriving at Utsubo's house. Akira happened to deliver a package to Utsubo's house, where he unexpectedly ran into Hina. Since they already knew each other, Utsubo had no choice but to invite Akira in for a cup of coffee. He was surprised by how fast Akira's company processed deliveries. Utsubo also apologized if Suzuki had hurt Akira earlier. Hina still seemed to dislike Akira, making him wonder why his good intentions were always misunderstood as something perverted. Utsubo explained that society had changed nowadays. If someone tried to help others, they were seen as hypocrites. While drinking coffee, Akira burned his tongue and decided to leave. After he was gone, Utsubo admitted that Akira was genuinely a good person, albeit a bit slow-witted. He wondered how Akira would react once both the director and Misaki suddenly disappeared. Later, Akira visited Yoko's place again for a free meal. He mentioned that there were 3 culprits involved in Hina's case years ago. He had already taken care of 2, and now he had met the last one, Utsubo. However, he wasn't sure how Utsubo, Hina, and Suzuki were all connected. Yoko warned him to stop digging any deeper. Meanwhile, Suzuki was discussing plans with Utsubo. They talked about Fable, and Suzuki believed that once someone was targeted by Fable, they were as good as dead except for Utsubo. 4 years ago, Utsubo had been trafficking girls aged 10 to 16 to perverts, mainly runaway kids but sometimes kidnapping victims. In June that year, his manager had his throat slit by an unknown killer before he could even fire his gun. Utsubo took the gun and, 10 days later, another accomplice was killed. Hina was also involved in the incident. She was hospitalized, and a year later, Utsubo disguised himself as a detective to find her. Hina pretended to know nothing, fearing the hitman would silence her. In reality, Utsubo was the one who had killed her parents and framed the hitman for it. That day, while working, the director received a call from Utsubo, who had contacted his mother and requested to meet both of them. That afternoon, Hina was practicing walking but noticed that Akira hadn't shown up. She then saw the director and his mother heading to their meeting with Utsubo. The director's mother was unaware of his crimes and still believed he was a good son. Akira also went there but only observed from a distance. Hina found it more unsettling for him to just sit and watch, so she urged him to come closer. Utsubo met with the mother and son, asking to record their conversation. He confirmed that the director's name was Etsuji and asked if he had a girlfriend or love interest. Etsuji denied it, but when Utsubo brought up Misaki, he flinched slightly. When asked about his relationship with Misaki, Etsuji claimed they were just colleagues and that he had no feelings for her. Utsubo then revealed that a talent scout friend had been eyeing Misaki because of her past modeling career. However, the same friend had discovered hidden cameras in her home. Utsubo also mentioned that Etsuji had recently visited Misaki's house carrying suspicious items. Etsuji insisted he was innocent and told Utsubo to investigate if he wanted. However, Utsubo hinted that if an investigation were to happen, more of Etsuji's crimes might come to light. Just then, Isaki entered, causing Etsuji to panic. Utsubo knew that Etsuji had criminal intentions, but Etsuji argued that thinking about a crime wasn't the same as committing one. Utsubo then displayed countless hidden camera videos taken by Etsuji. Etsuji was shaken, but Utsubo assured him that they hadn't told Misaki yet. Isaki was still interested in recruiting Misaki for modeling, and if these videos leaked, her reputation would suffer. Therefore, Isaki demanded a settlement of 120 million yen and threatened to sue. Utsubo, however, suggested settling the matter without going to court, as legal fees alone would cost around 80 million yen. Instead, he proposed that Etsuji pay 60 million yen, half the initial demand, to make the issue disappear. Meanwhile, Akira was helping Hina practice walking, allowing her to regain the sensation in her legs. Akira suddenly noticed that Etsuji and his mother were heading home. Isaki and Utsubo were confident they would pocket the full 60 million yen. Since Etsuji was an only child, with his father deceased and only his mother left, she would surely do whatever it took to keep her son out of prison. While both Utsubo and Isaki were con artists, they wouldn't suffer any losses even if the scheme fell apart after all. Etsuji was the one in the wrong. Upon returning home, Etsuji blamed Misaki for everything. Suzuki reported this to Utsubo, who didn't care if Etsuji went mad and killed Misaki, as long as Suzuki captured him before the police got involved. The next day, Itsuji arrived at work with hatred in his eyes toward Misaki. He couldn't believe someone like her was worth 60 million yen and decided to teach her a lesson. Meanwhile, Isaki was pleased to receive the money and no longer cared when Itsuji would act. Atsubo told Isaki to keep Hina out of this, but it seemed she had overheard part of their conversation. She then called Misaki, warning her to leave work immediately as it was dangerous. Just as the company president stepped out of the restroom, Itsuji was about to stab Misaki from behind. The president shouted, and Akira knocked Itsuji out on the spot. Akira then played it off, claiming Itsuji had tried something against him, and when he turned around, they collided. The president asked Misaki to handle deliveries in Akira's place while he questioned Itsuji to report the incident to the police. Misaki then mentioned receiving a strange phone call, and moments later, Atsubo entered, sensing that Hina had done something behind his back. He casually asked Akira about Hina's recovery, and she admitted that Akira was so honest it was almost bizarre. Meanwhile, the president confronted Itsuji about his intentions. Itsuji asked to wash his face, but the president knew he had planned to murder Misaki and considered reporting him to the police. Before he could do so, Itsuji fled, forcing Akira to chase him. Akira barely dodged a bullet from Suzuki, realizing his opponent was a professional. Suzuki captured Itsuji and took him away. Later, he told Utsubo to have Isaki pick up the captive since Akira had seen his face, he had to eliminate him. Suzuki then spotted Akira, but couldn't make a move because there were people around. Akira later approached him, demanding Itsuji's release and promising not to expose Suzuki's actions. However, Suzuki scoffed at the idea of negotiating, knowing Akira understood exactly what kind of person he was. Akira acknowledged that every side had its own circumstances and didn't want unnecessary conflict. He warned that if Itsuji didn't return by tomorrow, chaos would ensue. At the same time, the president reported the incident to the police when he received an unexpected call from Hina, asking about Akira. Suzuki, meanwhile, contacted Isaki, ordering him to extract Akira's home address from Itsuji. Once he had the information, he set off immediately. Akira returned to the president, who informed him that Itsuji's case had been handed over to the police. The director now understood that Akira was highly skilled in martial arts, but had deliberately held back in fights. Akira admitted this was true, and the president promised to keep it a secret. He also mentioned that Hina had called and left her number, suggesting Akira contact her. Just then, Suzuki arrived at Akira's home and met Yoko. He placed his gun on the table and asked her to sit down for a talk. He already knew that Akira's older brother was Fable. He also knew Yoko would act as if she knew nothing. Her calmness in the face of an armed intruder gave her away. Suzuki questioned her connection to Hiroshi's gang, and she falsely claimed that she and Akira were Hiroshi's illegitimate children. However, Suzuki wasn't easily deceived. Realizing he was underestimating her, Yoko pointed out that placing his gun on the table and resting his hands down was a mistake. Curious about her confidence, Suzuki wanted to see how she planned to seize his weapon. Without hesitation, Yoko slammed the table into him, knocking the gun toward her. Meanwhile, Isaki had stepped away to relieve himself in the bushes. When he returned, Itsuji had vanished without a trace. Yoko demanded an answer from Suzuki, but he told her to shoot if she wanted. He wasn't afraid. He acknowledged her skills but pointed out that she had never killed anyone before. As a seasoned assassin, he could sense the presence of those who had taken lives. Yoko placed the gun back on the table, choosing to handle things her way. Suzuki warned that the hot pot was about to boil over, but Yoko was confident she could finish dealing with him and turn off the stove in time. Suzuki suddenly slammed the table, but Yoko swiftly blocked his knife and struck his neck, knocking him unconscious before shutting off the stove. When Akira returned home, he found Suzuki there. Meanwhile, Yoko was drunk and told him to handle the situation himself. Suzuki realized that Akira had become involved with Hina because they had met before. Just as Suzuki was about to say the name Fable, Akira cut him off, demanding that he keep his mouth shut and return Itsuji. Since keeping Itsuji alive wouldn't cost them anything, there was no reason not to comply. If they were worried that Itsuji would come after Misaki, Akira would take responsibility for protecting her. Suzuki called Isaki to release Itsuji, but Isaki regretfully reported that Itsuji had attempted to escape while still blindfolded and had fallen off a cliff to his death. Suzuki ordered Isaki to bury the body, but Isaki refused, saying he couldn't do it alone. Akira turned off his phone, walked over, and cut Suzuki's restraints. He expressed his disappointment that someone had died. Allowing Suzuki to leave, Akira then checked on the hot pot. As Suzuki reached the door, he turned back, accusing Akira of underestimating him. Now that he knew Akira's secret, he found it insulting that Akira didn't even see him as a threat worth guarding against. Frustrated, Suzuki left. Yoko noted that Akira had just crushed Suzuki's pride. While Akira felt sorry for Etsuji, Yoko dismissed it as karma. Later, Akira went to the movies and suddenly remembered he needed to call Hina. When he finally called, she was just happy he was safe, but scolded him for focusing on a movie instead of listening to her. Meanwhile, Atsubo was surprised that Akira was still alive when Suzuki returned. Suzuki had a drink with Atsubo and informed him about Etsuji's death, along with Isaki cleaning up the mess in the mountains. He then revealed that Akira and Yoko were the very fable that Atsubo had been searching for. Atsubo was intrigued and decided to challenge Fable directly. However, Suzuki wanted to know why Atsubo was willing to fight. If Atsubo didn't answer, Suzuki would shoot. He needed to be sure of Atsubo's commitment. He didn't want to be abandoned if things went south. Suzuki had been in this line of work for 20 years, once at his peak, though his current face was the result of plastic surgery. Now that his body was deteriorating, he at least wanted to reclaim some dignity before the end. Atsubo finally revealed his reason. The man who had been in the car with Hina that day was his younger brother. That was why he wanted revenge, nothing more. If he had feared Fable, he would have fled long ago. Though not entirely convinced, Suzuki decided to believe him for now. Atsubo then began crafting a meticulous plan to eliminate both Akira and Yoko. Suzuki wanted only 2 people involved and insisted on keeping Hina and Isaki out of it to prevent unnecessary consequences. Later, Atsubo reflected on his previous encounter with Akira. He was certain that Akira had recognized him, but had concealed his intent flawlessly, a terrifying ability. That night, Hina dreamed of finally being able to stand and walk toward Akira, only for him to be suddenly shot. The next day, the company president personally picked up Misaki for work and offered to drive her home later. She was worried about Akira, but the president reassured her that he would be fine. Meanwhile, Atsubo noticed that Akira frequently waited for Hina at the park. He later brought supplies back to Suzuki, then woke up Isaki and sent him to shower so they could plan in peace. Atsubo had prepared 4 grenades, 3 firearms, and several other tools, all set for when Fable appeared. However, they needed a strategy against Akira, knowing they would lose in a direct confrontation. They devised 3 backup plans, no more, because if all 3 failed, they would be dead anyway. Suzuki pointed out that assassins were at a disadvantage when they had to protect someone. He then proposed a solution: kidnapping Misaki. Atsubo considered Hina a more viable target than Misaki, as she would be easier to manipulate. Besides, he had already planned to discard her. The next day, Akira called Takeshi, asking him to delete certain camera footage before Hashi could see it. Takeshi said he would have Kiro handle it, as Hashi had been quite busy lately. He then checked in on Akira, who assured him that he was fine. Meanwhile, Suzuki visited an arms dealer to purchase a suppressor. He also inquired about an escape route out of Japan once everything was settled. The dealer set the price at 10 million yen, citing the rising costs of everything. Suzuki was surprised that the dealer didn't ask many questions, but the man explained that he remained neutral. He served any customer, whether friend or foe, without getting involved. His neutrality had allowed him to stay in business for so long, and because of it, he had access to valuable information. His advice to Suzuki was to stop provoking Fable, but giving up on that would mean abandoning the very reason Suzuki was still alive. At the same time, Akira brought alcohol to apologize to Yoko for dragging her into danger. He also asked if she had any more information about Hina. Yoko worried that he was getting involved in something risky again, but she still shared what she knew. 2 days after Hina was hospitalized, her parents were suddenly murdered by a knife-wielding attacker. Akira was certain that he was not responsible and had already begun piecing together what had happened. Atsubo summoned Hina, remarking that despite knowing his true nature, she had followed him all this time. He also knew that she was still searching for her parents' murderer. Since he had operated under the guise of a detective, he had investigative skills. He was aware that she wanted to regain her ability to walk so she could take revenge. Though she struggled internally, he claimed he had discovered the culprit's identity. He then pinned the blame on Akira, suggesting that Akira had approached her only to keep her from suspecting the truth. Meanwhile, Kuro watched footage of Yoko defeating Suzuki with great amusement. Instead of deleting it, he decided to keep a copy. Around the same time, Isaki called Kuro with some questions about fishing. He had confirmed that the river he was near was not a popular fishing spot, but with heavy rain making the current stronger, he was unsure if he should dump the body there. Hina began investigating Akira, while Utsubo proceeded with his ambush preparations. As he set up traps, Hina suddenly stepped forward and asked to join. She requested a gun, so Utsubo handed her one, telling her to get used to holding it before he gave her ammunition. Meanwhile, Isaki continued trying to dispose of the body. When a pair of pants floated back toward him, he realized he had to recover the corpse and find another way to deal with it. Hina erased all traces of their past fraud schemes, preparing to abandon the office. Not long after, Utsubo decided to leave Isaki behind and take Hina with him. Suzuki also set up a trap at the entrance, waiting for Akira to arrive. Utsubo then called Akira, asking if he remembered him. Akira recalled his real name, prompting Utsubo to question why he had let Suzuki go. Akira simply stated that Suzuki's life had nothing to do with him, so he had no reason to interfere. Utsubo then pressed him about why he had approached Hina. Was it because he pitied her for getting caught up in his mess and getting injured? Realizing he had hit the mark, Utsubo concluded that even a legendary assassin like Akira was capable of such emotions. He claimed he had not revealed Akira's identity to Hina and invited him to the office for a meeting. Akira set out, with Yoko insisting on coming along, eager to settle the score with Suzuki. The two departed together, while Isaki unexpectedly arrived at Kuro's place, looking to buy a repossessed car. Kuro had several, but they were all expensive models. When Isaki asked for a cheaper one, Kuro remarked that nobody used budget cars as collateral for debts. Without even asking, he already knew Isaki had gotten himself into trouble. Akira arrived at the location, and Suzuki immediately noticed that Yoko was with him. Akira went in alone and saw that all the cameras in the area had been destroyed. Suzuki planned to wait until Akira opened the door, triggering the bomb, leaving him with only 2 seconds to escape before it exploded. When Akira opened the door, he quickly detected the bomb, leaped out of the hallway, and jumped to another floor. Suzuki had no idea how Akira managed to escape so quickly. Akira soon spotted Suzuki and told Yoko to tail him, knowing he was heading to Utsubo. He then reassured the locals that it was just a gas leak and nothing serious. He had already suspected there would be a bomb, but he still triggered it on purpose because he was the only one who could escape such a trap. Better for him to set it off than for someone else to fall victim to it later. Yoko pursued Suzuki, who attempted to lure her into a second trap. However, she noticed him deliberately slowing down, realizing it was a setup. Meanwhile, Kuro arrived with a car for Isaki. It was an expensive one, repossessed due to unpaid debts. Just then, Akira called, urgently requesting a vehicle. Kuro decided to take the car for a short trip before returning it. Akira stopped by a convenience store, instructing Yoko not to go too deep but to locate Suzuki and observe from a distance. He told Kuro to bring the car over and planned to follow her soon. After meeting Kuro outside, he swiftly took the car and drove off. Yoko then realized Suzuki was deliberately using odd routes to avoid license plate detection, likely trying to leave no evidence behind. Akira decided to follow the same path and once again warned Yoko not to advance too far. He then asked Kuro about the mountain pass Yoko was approaching. Kuro mentioned it used to be a spot for street racers, but wasn't sure about its current state. Akira instructed Yoko to stop and observe, then studied Kuro's map for a moment, memorizing the route. Although he didn't have Yoko's exceptional memory, he could recall short-term details well. Switching to high-speed mode, he accelerated toward the destination. Yoko suddenly saw Suzuki dash into the road and throw something, mistaking it for a bomb. She instinctively jumped out of her vehicle, but he quickly seized her from behind. Knowing she was traumatized by a previous explosion, he had deliberately used her fear against her. He then forced her to discard her phone and radio, ordering her to crawl forward. Akira called Yoko, but when she didn't respond, he immediately realized she had been captured. He and Kuro sped up. Meanwhile, Yoko was taken to Utsubo, who tied her to a tree. Upon arriving, Akira instructed Kuro to move to the car and continuously honk the horn. He then grabbed his gun loaded with dummy rounds and went to confront Atsubo's group. Atsubo handed Hina real bullets, instructing her to shoot Akira if he got too close. Instead, she loaded the gun and shot Atsubo. Hearing the gunfire, Akira rushed forward. However, Atsubo survived, having worn a bulletproof vest. The sound of the car horn signaled Akira's arrival. Suzuki suspected the noise was meant to mask Akira's footsteps. Hina had figured out that Atsubo was the one who killed her parents. The police had never disclosed the details of their murder, meaning only someone involved would know. Atsubo had carelessly let it slip while trying to frame Akira. When confronted, he admitted it and offered Hina a chance at revenge. Sitting still, he challenged her to shoot him in the head. She fired but missed. Atsubo kept taunting her, eager to see how she would manage to shoot him. Determined, she stood up and stepped forward, but Suzuki suddenly warned her to stop. She had just stepped on a landmine. If she lifted her foot, she would be blown apart. The mine had originally been set as a trap for Akira. Yoko pleaded with Suzuki to help Hina, knowing Akira wouldn't kill him. But Suzuki hesitated, uncertain if he could trust that. Atsubo then explained that the mine was military grade. At best, Hina would only lose her legs. If she was lucky, she could trade her legs for his life. Suzuki urged Atsubo to stop provoking her, realizing the situation was spiraling out of control. Atsubo didn't care about losing Hina since he still had Yoko tied up. Hina, overwhelmed, fired another shot but missed. The recoil caused her to stumble, and Suzuki attempted to save her. However, Akira was faster, catching her before her foot lifted off the mine. He wanted her to value her life and brought over a wheelchair for her to lean on. Before Atsubo could retrieve his gun, Akira shot him once. Yoko assumed everything was over, but Atsubo signaled Suzuki to act while using Yoko as a shield. Suzuki knew about Akira's dummy bullets, so if both he and Atsubo fired, Akira would surely die. However, Atsubo only intended to shoot Hina if she collapsed. The mine would kill Akira as well. Realizing this, Suzuki declared that if Atsubo shot Hina, he would shoot him immediately. Atsubo, now desperate, pulled out a bomb and threw it at Akira. Akira shielded Hina with his body and remained unharmed. Losing trust in Atsubo, Suzuki decided to release Yoko, as the situation had spiraled out of control after Hina stepped on the mine. Seeing himself as Hina's older brother, he vowed to protect her legs. He intended to sacrifice himself to save her, but Yoko urged him to use his head instead. While she kept an eye on Atsubo, Akira examined the mine and identified it as a Soviet-era landmine. Due to Cold War-era mass production between the US and the USSR, these weapons had been sold off globally. The presence of such mines in Asia likely stemmed from the Vietnam War and the Cambodian Civil War. Though uncertain whether the mine was still functional, they couldn't take any risks. Akira then noticed an excavator nearby. Suzuki confirmed it was still operational. Yoko retrieved a bulletproof vest from Atsubo, while Suzuki dug around the mine. Akira wrapped Hina's leg in the vest. On his signal, he would pull her away while Suzuki used the excavator's bucket to contain the blast. Hina recalled that Akira had saved her 4 years ago and was now doing it again. She no longer blamed him for her accident and assured him he need not feel guilty. However, he had promised she would walk again in 6 months, and he intended to keep that promise. Together, they executed the plan. The mine detonated, but when Suzuki checked, Hina was unharmed, only her shoe tip was scorched. Akira, however, was injured, his back bleeding likely from shrapnel from the previous explosion. Despite this, he could still move his limbs, meaning the wound wasn't severe. Atsubo admitted defeat, but then threw another bomb. Suzuki shot him dead, only to realize the pin hadn't been pulled. Atsubo had anticipated everything, including his own death. Suzuki was at a loss for how to handle the aftermath, but Yoko suggested a cover story. As detectives, they had made many enemies who sought revenge. Out of fear, Suzuki and Atsubo took Hina to the police and disappeared. The apartment explosion, the work of vengeful criminals. Suzuki found the story simple yet plausible, making it difficult to investigate further. Akira asked Hina if she had any trustworthy relatives. She mentioned an uncle, so they planned to take her to the police to contact him. Akira then called Kuro to bring a car. When Kuro arrived, Isaki contacted him, urging him to return the vehicle soon. Suzuki inquired about Kuro's connection to Isaki, but Kuro only said they knew each other from before. He also recognized Suzuki as the one Yoko had beaten up earlier. Kiro drove Akira and Yoko home. Akira believed this was the end of his connection with Hina. As they left, Hina struggled to her feet and embraced him. Yoko understood that after this, they would never see each other again. Back home, Yoko removed the shrapnel from Akira's back. He told her to simply apply a bandage, assuring her he would heal on his own. He then resumed working on his Christmas artwork to meet his deadline. The next day, the police discovered a body floating in the river. Akira then brought his completed illustrations to his boss, including a drawing of Hina standing up from her wheelchair. His boss was curious about where he got the inspiration for that. Shortly after, the police informed the boss that they had found Etsuji's drowned body and would proceed with an autopsy. Meanwhile, Kiro delivered another car to Isaki and coincidentally found Suzuki inside. Suzuki eliminated Isaki, knowing he would be a liability to both him and Hina in the future. Kiro noted that Isaki had attempted to run before, and if Suzuki hadn't done it, Kiro himself would have. Suzuki then advised Kiro to abandon his assassin ambitions, stating that Akira was the most brilliant individual he had ever encountered. If there were a tournament for assassins, Suzuki was certain Akira would win. Suzuki also handed Kiro a letter from Hina for Akira, along with 6 million in cash as compensation and payment for the car. Since he still had 20 million from Atsubo, he didn't need too much cash, as it would be burdensome if not deposited in a bank. Akira noticed Yoko was still irritated about being deceived and captured by Suzuki. He remarked that a professional would never pull a bomb pin in front of someone else if they did. There was a 70% chance it was fake. He was also annoyed that Atsubo had lied about not telling Hina his real identity, making him go through the trouble of wearing a mask. It wasn't until he overheard the argument in the forest that he realized he had been exposed. Yoko observed that Akira rarely displayed emotions. If he wanted to live a normal life, he needed to learn how to express himself like an ordinary person. She taught him a few techniques, but his attempts at emoting looked amusing. Later, Kiro stopped by to deliver Hina's letter and the 6 million from Suzuki. However, both Yoko and Akira insisted that Kiro keep the money. But Kiro, having been taught by Takeshi to handle money professionally, made Akira accept it. Grateful for everything Kiro had done, Akira then gave the 6 million back to him as a reward. Akira also requested the car Kiro had previously brought, as his blood had soaked the passenger seat, and he didn't want to leave it behind. However, Kiro revealed that the car was tied to a mortgage, prompting him to call Takeshi to discuss the matter. Takeshi explained that the car belonged to a debtor and that he could give it to Akira for free, as he still owed him a favor from the Kojima case. However, Kiro needed to retrieve the car keys from the garage for him. With everything settled, the next morning, Akira saw the final results of his work after Misaki's edits. She then taught him how to use a computer, and their boss noted that they seemed like a good match. Meanwhile, Kiro delivered the keys to Takeshi. When Takeshi asked where the car was, Kiro revealed that it had already been crushed in a junkyard. Shocked, Takeshi then questioned why Kiro even bothered bringing the keys if the car was gone. Takeshi had originally gifted Akira the white car in hopes of reclaiming his beloved vehicle, but Kiro had misunderstood and scrapped it. Furious, Takeshi demanded that Kiro pay for the white car himself and prepared to punish him for his actions first, breaking his leg by jumping off a bridge and now destroying his treasured car. Elsewhere, the boss asked Misaki and Akira about their Christmas plans. Since neither had concrete plans, he decided to throw a party. Misaki suggested inviting Yoko, so Akira returned home to inform her. Yoko agreed and suggested hosting the party at their place. Later, the chairman visited a bar, noting how much had happened recently. Meanwhile, Akira burned Hina's letter after reading it, following her wishes. In the letter, she admitted that she once hated him, but now only felt gratitude. If he hadn't killed that man back then, she would have been sold off to perverts. She acknowledged that everything that happened to her resulted from her own rebellion. Running away from home led her to this fate. Though she wished to forget the past, she had one request. In 6 months, when she could walk again, she wanted Akira to picture her standing. As the letter turned to ashes, the film came to an end.